Say mama and say mom and daddy. Say mom and dad. I ain't got to help my bulldogger sister. Whoever old you sucking. Oath man. I ain't got to help nobody. I made it. MHM. I ain't got to help my mama. My mama should have had her together before I made it, right? So don't put that pressure on me, mama. It was your responsibility to raise me. Whoever catch Shaw in White Record and knock his whole ass out and take his phone. I get 3,500 flat. Call my bluff. If one of y'all can catch that just talking on the phone. Yo, stop. Rewind that. Did she just put a price on a man's head on camera on the internet for the whole world to see? $3,500. That is what Victoria Wood, also known as Bro, Glorilla's sister, decided Charleston White's safety was worth. $3,500 publicly filmed, posted, shared, and the internet treated it like content, like a reaction video, like just another chapter in the never-ending story of social media beef. But here's what y'all missed while you were in the comments laughing and clipping and sharing. Charleston White was already on the phone with his lawyer. This is the full breakdown. The beef, the bounty, the legal play nobody saw coming, and what it means for everybody out here treating the internet like it's a consequence-free zone. Let's get into it. And before we can talk about the bounty, before we talk about Glorilla's sister, before any of this makes sense, y'all need to understand who Charleston White actually is. Because if you think this is just some random internet personality catching smoke from a celebrity's family member, you are missing the whole picture. Charleston White grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, and not the version of Fort Worth you see in B videos. He grew up in the suburbs, sheltered, nurtured. A mother who worked at General Motors, a grandfather with a barbershop, uncles and male cousins who made up the village his household was built on. But here's the thing about Charleston's childhood that most people skip over. The man spent years in hospitals. From age 5 to 12, he was in and out of surgery. 2 leg surgeries after falling into a washing machine on full spin cycle at 5 years old. Broke everything from his waist down. Then at 7, a homemade slingshot incident followed by a head collision at the circus put his eye through 9 surgeries over the next several years. 9. He grew up with prosthetic eye. He had a private tutor because he couldn't consistently attend school. His entire childhood was a hospital room. And then at 12 years old, the first time in his life, he made it through a full school year. Everything changed. He ended up in the Texas Youth Commission, the most violent youth offender program the state had at the time, a program built by psychologists and psychiatrists around something called positive peer culture, designed specifically for children who had committed murder. He wasn't that. He was a suburban kid who got pulled into gang culture during a period of his life when he was finally free enough to go outside, finally able to move around, and he chased the first thing that gave him the belonging and the identity his sheltered upbringing never prepared him for. He spent 7 years in that program, came out at 21, and spent the years that followed building himself into something that the system wasn't designed to produce. A man who understood that system better than most people who had never been caught in it. He became a mitigation specialist, someone who works in criminal defense to humanize defendants, to contextualize their lives, to explain to courts and juries how a human being ends up in front of them. He went on to build a social media platform that reached millions. He did stand-up comedy. He toured with Live Nation. He ran a 52-week self-funded tour. He had a residency in Las Vegas. He's got a brand deal with a water company, boxing management under his belt, and a TV show called Could Have Been Love. This is not a man who stumbles into beef. This is a man who has spent decades understanding how consequence works legally, socially, spiritually. So, when somebody put bounty on his head and thought he would either cower or just clap back on Live and call it a day, they read the wrong man entirely. Now, let's go back to where this actually started, because the root of this whole situation was a podcast appearance. A comment, a take. Charleston was a guest on the Talks with AJ podcast, a smaller show out of Miami. And during the interview, the host brought up something that was trending at the time. Glorilla's sister publicly calling Glorilla out for supposedly making it and not looking out for the family. The host asked Charleston straight up what he thought. Here's what he said word for word. I think them half-sisters. That's them. They got 2 different mamas. The host corrected him. Say mom and dad. And then Charleston said, Same mom and dad. And I ain't gotta help my bulldozer sister. Whoever knew be you sucking. I ain't gotta help nobody. I made it. I ain't got to help my mama. My mama should have had her soap together before I made it, right? So don't put that pressure on me. Mama, it was your responsibility to raise me, not for me to grow up and take care of you. Now, hold on. Before we go further, let's be real about what that actually was. That was a take on the so-called black tax. The idea that when somebody in a black family or community makes it, they're automatically obligated to take care of everyone around them. Charleston was pushing back on that idea, using Glorilla's family situation as a launching point for a broader conversation about responsibility, obligation, and who owes who what. Was it blunt? Absolutely. Was it the kind of thing that's going to rub people the wrong way? 100%. But it was commentary. It was not a personal attack on Glorilla as an artist. It was not directed at Broiler specifically. It was not a threat. It was not a challenge. It was an opinion on a podcast from a man who had just spent the previous 30 minutes of the same interview talking about how he bought his mother a house, bought his sister a car off the showroom floor, took care of his whole family before he gave himself anything. I could have had mansions, he said. I went and gave it all to the loved ones who I appreciate. That's the irony we're going to come back to. But first, Victoria Wood's response. Glorilla didn't respond with a podcast appearance of her own. She didn't call into a show. She didn't tweet something slick. She didn't even make a disc video. She went on camera and offered $3,500 to any person willing to physically assault Charleston White, bash his face in her words, and take his phone. Let's be very precise about what that is legally, because the internet kept treating it like a clout moment. When you publicly offer money to a third party in exchange for them committing a violent act against a specific named individual, that is solicitation to commit assault. In many jurisdictions, depending on the specifics, it can rise to conspiracy. You do not have to actually pay anyone. You do not have to have a specific person lined up. The public offer itself with intent is the crime. And she did on camera with her face visible using her real name on a platform tied to her identity as Glorilla's sister, which gave it reach that an anonymous account never would have had. The internet was chaotic about it. Some people thought it was hilarious. Some people were calling her crazy. Some were genuinely hyped about it, talking about who was going to go claim the money. Comments were flying. The clip was getting shared everywhere. And that spread, that virality is actually what made it worse legally, because now there's no arguing. And she didn't know it was public. There's no arguing she didn't understand what she was saying. She watched it go viral and let it ride. Now, let's be all the way honest here, because this script isn't here to cape for Charleston White uncritically. His initial public response was a lot. He went live with weapons visible. He was talking about being George Zimmerman. He made comments about Trayvon Martin, specifically saying Trayvon was disobedient and deserved what happened to him that were genuinely offensive, and that drew serious backlash from people across the board. He was waving around what people were calling a sword. He was talking about choking people in wheelchairs, hitting women, all kind of inflammatory stuff. The internet was split. Half the people watching thought he had lost his mind. The other half thought it was some kind of performance art. A lot of people who might have been on his side about the bounty situation got distracted by how unhinged reaction looked on the surface. And here's the thing, some of those criticisms were valid. The Trayvon Martin stuff was unnecessary. It was hurtful to a family that has nothing to do with any of this. It crossed a line that had no reason to be crossed. And the people who call him out on it weren't wrong. But, and this is the part the internet missed while it was focused on the chaos. While all of that was happening on camera for the audience, behind the scenes, Charleston was building a case. Here's where it gets crazy. And I mean genuinely, strategically crazy in a way that only someone who has spent years studying how the system works can pull off. Charleston White, simultaneously with all of that public noise, was on the phone with his agency, his attorney, and the Miami Police Department. He filed a formal police report. He received a report number. The state attorney's office was briefed. And according to Charleston's own account, when investigators actually sat down and listened to Glorilla's video, when they played it in a professional context and watched someone explicitly describe bashing a named person's face in an offer to pay for it, the response from law enforcement was immediate and serious. And then Charleston went on camera not to fight, not to threaten, not to escalate the street beef, but to deliver a message that was clearly, deliberately structured to serve as documentation. He said it 4 times slowly, back to back, like he was reading from something his lawyer had approved. To anybody that's thinking about taking that $3,500, the police is now involved. One more time, the police is now involved. And again, the police is now involved. That's not a man who's scared. That's a man who understands that everything he says on camera is also evidence. He was on record stating that law enforcement had been contacted, that this was now a criminal matter, and that anyone who attempted to collect that bounty would not be walking into a street situation. They would be walking into a premeditated, fully documented assault charge with an active police report already filed. He said it himself. I don't know what made Funky Monkey think I wasn't going to put 911 on her. Now, here's where Broiler made the move that legally speaking may have truly cooked her. After the police report was filed, after Charleston went on camera and stated multiple times that law enforcement was involved, after it was publicly known that charges were being discussed, she posted another video. And in that video, she confirmed the bounty was still on the table. Charleston's response was 5 words. You just convicted yourself. And he's not wrong from a legal standpoint, because now she doesn't have the defense of I didn't know, or I was just venting, or it was a moment of frustration. She was made aware that what she had done rose to the level of criminal conduct, and she doubled down publicly. That second video in a courtroom is no longer just evidence of the initial crime. It's evidence of intent, of willfulness, of someone who understood the legal risk and chose to restate the offer. Anyway, that's a different conversation with the judge than I made a dumb video when I was upset. Charleston made clear he was pressing charges and planned to attend every single court date. For people who think he's bluffing, this is a man who once described himself on that Talks with AJ podcast as having been a snitch since childhood, who said lying felt cowardly to him, who built his entire brand around saying what he means and meaning what he says, even when it cost him. He lost 13 or 14 shows after a controversial interview. His agency had to manage the fallout. His platform took hits, and he kept going. He is not someone who files a police report for optics and then quietly drops it. Let's go back to that podcast interview for a second, because there's a detail in there that makes this whole situation genuinely poetic in the most tragic way. The same conversation in which Charleston White made his comments about Glorilla's family situation, the same interview that Glorilla apparently took as a personal attack, also contained this. When the host asked Charleston about the so-called black tax and whether he looks out for his own family, he said, I bought my mom a house, car off the showroom floor, sister a car, cousin a car, son a car, dog. I went and bought everybody everything before I gave myself anything. I could have had mansions and at least 2, 3. I went and gave it all to the loved ones who I appreciate. That was self-rewarding. That was like going to get a wraith. So, the man who got a bounty put on him for supposedly being anti-family loyalty is the same man who publicly described giving everything he earned to his family before keeping anything for himself. He wasn't arguing against taking care of your people. He was arguing against the obligation being weaponized, against the pressure being used as guilt against people feeling entitled to someone else's success because of proximity. And Glorilla, who was publicly upset about Glorilla allegedly not doing enough for the family, responded by trying to get that man physically assaulted. Think about what that looks like from the outside. You're mad that your successful family member isn't giving you enough, so you put a bounty on a man who is just talking about it, and now you might be catching felony charges. The culture will be talking about that irony for a long time. To really understand why Charleston responded the way he did, the legal route, the deliberate camera statements, the Starbucks walk in Cleveland like nothing happened, you have to understand how this man thinks. On that Talks with AJ podcast, he said something that explains everything. I'm whatever I need to be to get the desired outcome. And he also said, going back to his childhood, I've always been an honest kid, even if it was at my default or consequences. I would tell myself I can't lie. Lying feels cowardly. So, as far back as I can remember, I told the truth. So I'm a snitch. He said it like it was a badge of honor, because to him it is. He didn't grow up in a household where calling the police was the ultimate betrayal. His mother was a foster parent. His family navigated institutions. He spent years inside the criminal justice system, not as someone running from it, but as someone studying it from the inside out. Most people in his position, somebody puts a bounty on their head. People are out here clipping the video and hyping it up. The instinct is to either hide or match the energy on social media, to go live and be crazy, to send people to respond the way the street logic says you respond. Charleston went and got a police report, walked around downtown Cleveland the next morning with a $100,000 watch on his wrist and no security, and live streamed himself watching regular people go to work. "I woke up in Miami and went to sleep in Cleveland," he said on that walk. "I ain't had to work a job in about 15 years. Totally unbothered, strategically unbothered, because he knew the machine was already moving without him having to do anything. Here's the bigger picture, and this is where I need y'all to actually pay attention, because this matters beyond Charleston and Glorilla. We have entered an era where social media beef has completely blurred the line between performance and criminal conduct. And a lot of people with platforms, with audiences, with reach do not understand where that line is. Putting a bounty on someone is not a clout moment. It is not a hot take. It is not beef content for the timeline. It is a criminal act. And the fact that it happened on Instagram or TikTok or whatever platform does not make it less real. It makes it more documented, more traceable, more prosecutable. The same technology that made Glorilla's video go viral is the same technology that put it in front of a detective in Miami, who said, according to Charleston, "Oh, just a O." Because on paper, in legal language, what she described as textbook solicitation to commit assault with robbery. And this is what Charleston White has been saying in different ways throughout his entire career. Consequences are real, systems are real, and the gap between what you feel like doing and what the law sees you doing is a gap that has swallowed a lot of people who didn't take it seriously. He literally said in that same podcast interview talking about criminal mitigation work, "You got to go back and undo all the wrong you was taught." Glorilla was never taught that posting a bounty on someone's head for $3,500 on a public platform is a crime. Or maybe she was taught and didn't believe it applied to her. It applies to her. So here's where everything is as of now. Charleston White has a filed police report with the Miami Police Department. He has a report number. His attorney and agency are actively involved. The state attorney's office has been briefed. Victoria Wood, Glorilla, made a second video after being made aware of pending charges and restated the bounty, which according to Charleston's legal team essentially amounts to self-incrimination on the record. Charleston says he is pressing charges. He says he is showing up to every court date. He says he wants to make an example, not in a street sense, but in a legal institutional. This is what happens when you do this sense. Whether charges are formally filed, whether this goes to trial, whether a plea deal gets worked out quietly somewhere, we don't know yet. But what we do know is that this situation is not going away the way regular internet beef goes away. Because regular internet beef fades when the next thing happens, when the next video drops, when the culture moves on to the next controversy. This one has a police report attached to it. And for everyone watching this thinking about making a similar move, whether it's a bounty, a threat, a solicitation dressed up as a joke, hey, I got money for whoever comment that you think is just venting. Understand something clearly. The internet remembers. Law enforcement has learned how to use the internet. And the people you're targeting, some of them know exactly how to hand that video directly to people whose job it is to act on